Lord, I pray that you will quiet our hearts and still our minds as we go into your word. That just like David prayed in the passage we studied last week, that you will give us clean hearts, God, as we go into this. And that as we approach this text, we won't just read ourselves into it, but first we'll understand what you intended us to understand from it. And then we'll be able to find where we fit into the story. And we'll figure out how to apply this, God, so that we won't fall into the same stupid mistakes that a lot of these characters fall into, God. We praise you for giving us your word, and I pray that your Spirit will guide us so that we don't make the same stupid mistake of trying to understand it according to our own knowledge, God. We love you and we praise you and we rejoice at the opportunity to get to know you more. So let us not get distracted, but let us give you and only you our undivided attention and devotion as we go into your word. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Okie dokie. So today we're back in 2 Samuel. We took a little bit of a break last week and we covered Psalm 51 just because it tied into the David and Bathsheba story. But now we are in 2 Samuel. We are in chapter 13. It's a little bit of a longer chapter, so we're probably going to have to go through it a bit quicker than some of the other chapters. It'll probably still take about the same amount of time, but we'll have to be going through each verse on a little bit quicker pace. But that being said, since pretty much everybody in here is a regular attendee to this Bible study, I don't really have to go super in-depth in the context. Y'all know who David is, y'all know what his background is, and y'all know kind of where we're at in the story. David is the second king of Israel. He is actually a great king, but he has done some really not great things as of late, right? And as of late, David has made a very stupid choice, and he has slept with a woman that was not his own. It was actually somebody else's woman, and he got her pregnant, and as a result, he tried to conceal his sin. Okay. That door is always difficult. And basically, David slept with Bathsheba, and he had Uriah killed, and as a result of all of that, David is being punished for his sin. And at the end of chapter 12, David did repent of his sin. He still had to face the consequences of that sin, and he's going to continue to face the consequences of that sin. Right? And so at the end of chapter 12, he did repent, he got right with God, and so where we find David, right here, everything is good between him and God. That does not mean that he escapes the punishment of his sin. And that's just something we need to understand theologically. Right? All because you have repented does not mean that you're free from consequences. Right? David is right before God. Right? God has forgiven him, and he was forgiven as soon as he said, I have sinned against the Lord. Right? Because he said it with a contrite heart. But his little baby son died as a result of that sin. And there's going to be 3 more sons that David loses. And his whole family is going to fall apart as a result of this. Right? So his adultery is going to just totally shatter everything. And so unfortunately, the rest of David's reign is not going to be a super fun time. I was actually talking with Brianne about this earlier. I really love the story of David, but I don't really enjoy as much talking about the back half of 2 Samuel. Because it's really just depressing. David is going to be faithful, and he's going to do some good things, but he's never going to quite measure up to the David we saw before, right? Like, he is going to be faithful to God, but he's not going to be the one taking the initiative, right? He's always going to be more of a passive figure who's reacting to the things around him. He's not going to be the one who just shows up on the battle lines and says, who is this uncircumcised Philistine? He's just not going to be that, right? He's going to be somebody who's more just having to react to the stuff going on around him. And part of me thinks that might just be because of guilt, right? He might think that he's kind of disqualified himself, which in a way he has, right? He's done some horrible stuff, and now he's just kind of dealing with the consequences of his actions, and he knows that's what he's dealing with. And so we saw the loss of one son yesterday. 2 weeks ago. In the last chapter we went through, in chapter 12. We're going to deal with the loss of another son today, and we're going to begin to deal with the beginning of the loss of a third son as well today. And really, the third son, we're going to be talking about him for the next few weeks. His name is Absalom. And then the fourth son is actually going to be lost a little while later. It's going to be a son who really, his death isn't even recounted until we get to 1 Kings. But yeah, so remember how David said that the rich man should pay fourfold for what he's done to the poor man in that story in 2 Samuel 12? David is going to pay fourfold. And so it is very sad. And so now we reach a story which I've just called Amnon and Tamar, because that is kind of the thing that sets us all off. But what I thought would be really helpful, just for understanding what's going to happen going forward, is before we actually got into the biblical text, I wanted to break down two different things. I wanted to break down a rough timeline of David's reign, and then I also wanted to break down his family tree. The reason why is because if you look at the timeline, I think it kind of just teaches us a little bit something about the consequences of sin. And if you look at the family tree, it'll help you out a whole lot, because from this point going forward, we are in full Game of Thrones mode. And if you do not know the family tree, this story is going to become very, very confusing, right? And there's going to be a lot of names, and we need to try to keep track of them. And it's going to feel almost like a trivia game every week. And so that's why I'm going to look through that. All right, so first off, this is a rough timeline of David's reign. This is from a commentary I recently started reading, not even necessarily for this Bible study, just because it's a very fascinating commentary. It's called A Son to Me by Peter J. Lightheart, and I really enjoy it. And he gives this timeline here, which is actually different than most of the timelines that I've seen of the chronology of David's life. But the arguments he gives for defending this timeline are actually kind of difficult to refute, just based on because he actually defended certain things, and I found it very fascinating. So what I want to do is I just want to walk through this real quick. So David is crowned in Hebron. This is, remember, back in 2 Samuel chapter 2. He becomes king in Hebron, and he's a king there in just over the people of Judah for 7 years, right? And so that's from ages 30 to 37. Whenever David's still fairly young, he was on the run for a little bit. He becomes king for 7 years there, and then after Ishbosheth and Abner are killed, once both of them are gone, then remember the people of Israel come down and they take him to Jerusalem. So that happens whenever David is 37, 38, right? And then what seems like happens is that maybe 11 or so years of relative peace go on. And whenever I say peace, I'm not saying that there's no war. It's actually peace because there's war. This is where David is just at the height of his reign. He has 11 years where he's just solid. He's going around, conquering everybody, doing all this crazy stuff, and he is literally establishing God's kingdom on earth for those 11 years. And then whenever you get to David at around age 49, the 19th year of his reign, that seems to be around the time he sins with Bathsheba, right? And so he's getting a little bit older. She's probably still pretty young. And he does this, but the main thing I want to highlight here is you'll notice that a lot of the things we're going to be dealing with happen decades later, right? That's the main thing I wanted to highlight here. He even suggests, and I've never seen people suggest this, but he suggests that Absalom's conspiracy, which is basically going to take us from next, really chapter 13, well, no, we're in chapter 13 today, right? Chapter 14 through the end of the book, right? Basically, the rest of the book, he is going to suggest in this commentary that might all take place in 1 year of David's life, which is crazy, because this means this is the worst year ever. But the main thing I wanted to highlight is that it seems like David sins when he's 49 years old, yet a lot of the different consequences he sees of his sin aren't until he's 61 or 63. And so I just wanted to highlight that, because we read the story and we just go from chapter 12 to chapter 13, and we might think that, just a few weeks or months have passed. It's very possible, and once again, he could be wrong, but it's possible that over a decade has passed in between David's sin with Bathsheba and what's going to be happening in this chapter, right? And that all goes back to how old Solomon was when he became king, how old Solomon's son was when he became king, and you work backwards and try to add it all up, and you're well, Solomon had to be born at this time, which means that the sin with Bathsheba had to happen even earlier, and that's kind of how he's coming up with all this chronology stuff. And the main reason I highlight this is not because you need to memorize these dates or anything. It's just to highlight the fact that your sin might not experience consequences immediately, right? It might be something where David, 10 years, right? And 10 years later, he's experiencing this knowing, yeah, this is a result of what I did 10 years ago. And he's been forgiven by God, and he knows he's right before God, but that doesn't mean he's exempt from the consequences. I just wanted to highlight that because he talked about that in the commentary, and I was I don't know, there's something very sobering to reflect on there, right? And some people might hear that, and they might almost use that to accuse God of something, right? God, I thought we were good. Why are you punishing me now? And it's well, because there's consequences of your actions, right? There's all because you have been forgiven does not mean there's that separation. And I think I just want to clarify that because sometimes our churches don't communicate that well, right? We almost equate forgiveness to prosperity, right? And that's not the biblical theology of life, right? That's not the worldview of the Bible. It's not all because you're forgiven, life's going to go well. Right? All you have to do is read the Bible to see that's not the case. And all because you're forgiven doesn't mean that your life going badly is just a test. No, it could be consequences for sin. It doesn't necessarily have to be. With Job, it wasn't. It was just a test, right? But we do have to consider that as a possibility in our lives. If things are going badly, it could just be a test from God. But it could be a consequence of sin. And so that's why you need to examine yourself and make sure, like, hey, am I sinning right now? Okay, then I'll repent. If I am, then I'll repent and we'll move on. And if I'm not, well, then maybe this is a test, or maybe this is from something I did a long time ago, right? I just wanted to point that out because, I don't know, whenever I was reading the book, it kind of stuck out to me, and I figured I'd just share that with y'all because I thought that was interesting. All right, but the more important thing I wanted to highlight here is this. Now, I couldn't find a family tree that looked simple because, to be honest, David's family tree is not simple in any way whatsoever. There are so many people involved here, so I literally just kind of boiled it down to the bare essentials. But let me just kind of explain this, right? So let's start with this one right here. This is Jesse. This is David's dad. And then right here, there's all these different children, right? You have Eliab, Abinadab, Shemaiah, Nethanel, Radai, Ozim, David. There probably is another son in there somewhere. We just don't know his name. And then there were 2 daughters at least, Zeruiah and Abigail, right? Because Zeruiah is the mother of the 3 sons, right? Joab and his 2 brothers, right? Remember that? Okay. So Zeruiah that's important right there. And so you can imagine some of the family trees, it splits off there and it goes crazy there as well. And then we also deal with some more children and stuff, even in this chapter. But for right now, keep your eyes on David here. And David has a bunch of wives. And with those wives, he has a bunch of kids. And this is the main thing we need to keep in our mind as we go into this story. Because we're going to have a bunch of kids being thrown around, their names being there. And I just want us to kind of understand the family dynamic. You can see why it's so complicated, and you can see why maybe God suggested that we should only have 1 man, 1 woman, 1 marriage, right? Because the moment you start introducing all these extramarital things, it also just makes things more complicated. To where all the siblings are just fighting one another and chasing after one another and fighting for power. You can see it goes contrary to God's design, right? And so going up here, I've got these separated by the women that David married in Hebron versus the women that he married in Jerusalem, right? And in Hebron, during those first 7 years of David's reign, he just kind of went a little bit girl crazy. And he married, well, some of them he actually married ahead of time. Remember, some of them he married whenever he was on the run from Saul, right? So that was like, remember, Ahinoam and Abigail? Remember, that was the wife of Nabal, and Nabal died, right? So some of these he married when he was on the run, but once he gets to Hebron and he's king, he has kids, right? The firstborn of those children is named Amnon. That is who we're going to be talking about today, right? So Amnon is the firstborn of David, which means that from an external perspective, what is he?
The next king.
The next king, right? We know that it seems like God has implied that Solomon is the next heir, but from an external perspective, Amnon is the next king, right? Eventually you get to Absalom, who's also going to be a big player in this chapter and in the chapters to come. So keep his name in mind. He is he's the son of Maacah. And Absalom has a sister whose name is Tamar, right? And so that would be the half-sister of Amnon, right? So once again, keep it all in your head. Amnon and Absalom are half-brothers from different women, both children of David, and Tamar is the sister of Absalom and therefore half-sister of Amnon, all right? There's also Adonijah. He's going to come into play, like I mentioned back, like in 1 Kings. He's a big player. Shephatiah, Ephraim, they're not really big figures. And then over here you have Bathsheba, who has 4 children for David. You have Shammua, Shobab, Nathan, and Solomon. People debate about the order they were born. Typically, people hold that Solomon was the firstborn of those after the first child died in 2 Samuel chapter 12. But some people debate about that, and maybe they suggest that maybe 2 Samuel just doesn't list all the children being born. And then David also had a bunch of concubines, and they had a bunch of kids as well. And so David was a great king. He was not the best with women. Actually, maybe he was too good with women. That's probably I don't know. It just depends on that. I guess it depends on perspective, right? He was so good with women that he was bad with women because he had a lot of women and you weren't supposed to. So there's that. So I know that this is the boring stuff that nobody likes talking about, but if you want to understand the story, you kind of have to be able to visualize this stuff. And it's the boring stuff, whenever we get to those chapters in the Bible where it's just endless genealogies, we don't like it because we're like, oh, let's move to the next part. But that's why this is here. Because you need to know the genealogies to know how people relate to one another so you can understand the story. Right? Okay, that all being said, now that it is 7:42, shall we actually get to the Bible? Yes?
Yeah.
Do you have any questions about this? All right, good.
Can I take a picture of this?
Afterwards. Yes. All right, cool. So, 2 Samuel chapter 13. Sean, take it away.
Now Absalom, David's son, had a beautiful sister whose name was Tamar. And after a time, Amnon, David's son, loved her. And Amnon was so tormented that he made himself ill because of his sister Tamar, for she was a virgin, and it seemed impossible to Amnon to do anything to her. But Amnon had a friend, whose name was Jonadab, the son of Shimea, David's brother. And Jonadab was a very crafty man. And he said to him, "O son of the king, why are you so haggard morning after morning? Will you not tell me?" Amnon said to him, "I love Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister." Jonadab said to him, "Lie down on your bed and pretend to be ill. And when your father comes to see you, say to him, 'Let my sister Tamar come and give me bread to eat, and prepare the food in my sight, that I may see it and eat it from her hand.'" So Amnon lay down and pretended to be ill. And when the king came to see him, Amnon said to the king, "Please let my sister Tamar come and make a couple of cakes in my sight, that I may eat from her hand."
All right. So, story starts out already kind of weird. It'll get weirder. Don't worry. Has anybody ever read the story before?
No.
No?
I have it.
Yeah, it's been a while?
I have, but it's been a while.
Yeah. All right. Cool. So, it's a wild ride. Get ready. This whole the rest of 2 Samuel is just a continuous wild ride. David's life was just wild. I mean, poor guy. All right. So what happens just here? Somebody summarize it for me.
David's son likes his sister. Is that correct?
His half-sister.
Half-sister.
Yes, but you know what? Sometimes you just need to leave the half out of there just to still emphasize the fact that it's still wrong. Yeah, so, yes, he likes his sister.
And well, he feels terrible because he likes his half sister and wants her to like him back, and he's trying to figure out a way to just them two to be in a room or something. I'll explain it.
Yeah, it's very weird.
Yeah.
A very weird dynamic going on here. Let's just walk through it. Let's just go for it. All right. Now Absalom, David's son, had a beautiful sister. Right off the bat, I just want to highlight something. Even though the story is primarily going to be about Amnon and Tamar, do you know notice who it starts with? Absalom. Because while we're going to focus on the story of Amnon and Tamar today, what you have to realize is that Absalom is really the main character starting at this point going forward. Because what's going to happen with Amnon and Tamar is going to be like a domino effect that sets in motion all these events that is going to eventually lead to Absalom rebelling against David and eventually Absalom's death as well. Right? And so Absalom really is the main character, but we need to tell the story of Amnon and Tamar in order to understand how Absalom got to where he got.
And it starts that way to show you how it relates to him.
Yes, yeah. And so it says, now Absalom, David's son, had a beautiful sister whose name was Tamar. Also, fun fact, David must have had really good genes and his wife must have been beautiful because not only is Tamar described as beautiful, but later on we're going to see that Absalom is described kind of like how Saul was, where he is just the most beautiful Israelite in all the land. And so this is apparently a very good-looking brother-sister duo. Not that that's really significant at all. I mean, I guess it is because the Bible highlights it for both of them. But for this story, Tamar's beauty is significant just to highlight probably the source of Amnon's desire, right? It probably highlights the fact that he wasn't just interested in her godly character, right? So, now Absalom, David's son, had a beautiful sister whose name was Tamar. Have we read about a Tamar before in the Bible? Where at?
Wasn't it in the Jericho, if I remember correctly? Or
That's Rahab.
Okay.
This is with Judah.
With Judah, back in Genesis, right? Judah and Tamar. Do you remember what the deal was there?
Oh, is that the one where the son
it
of
was
Israel
strict.
had to get circumcised or something?
No, that was a different one.
It's like
her,
where he was tricked into sleeping with another woman after he had made that deal to work for the other sister.
Yes, so basically, once again, it's a kind of incestuous sex affair. right? Which is exactly what's happening right here, right? So in the book of Genesis, you have this woman named Tamar, and she marries one of the sons of Judah, from the tribe of Judah, like Jacob's son. And Tamar marries one of the sons, and then the son dies because he's evil. And then so Judah allows her to marry his next son, and that son dies. And at this point, Judah's like, you know what? I don't think I'm going to let you marry my sons because I think you're the problem. When really it was the sons that were the problem. And so Judah actually kind of makes Tamar taboo and just doesn't associate with her anymore. And Tamar doesn't like this because now she's a widow and she's suffering and going through all this stuff. So she basically sets in motion this plan where she dresses up like a prostitute because she knows Judah's a scumbag. And Judah comes by and he sleeps with her, not knowing that it's his daughter-in-law. And she gets pregnant by him, and this is all through whom the royal line of Jesus comes, right? David is descended from this Judah and Tamar, right? So this is part of their history. I mainly just highlighted that because they both have the same name, and they both of their stories are associated with an incestuous sexual sin, right? In Genesis 37, Genesis 38, and then right here in 2 Samuel 13, both Tamars are kind of associated with that. If you name your daughter Tamar, watch out for her.
I'm definitely not doing that.
Now Absalom, David's son, had a beautiful sister whose name was Tamar. And after a time, Amnon, David's son, loved her. All right. Let's explain that for a second. What's going on?
Amnon likes Tamar
Mm-hmm.
in a desirable way.
Yeah. So Amnon, once again, Absalom and Tamar are siblings, and then Amnon is the half-brother of both of them. No matter what, this is inappropriate. It goes against Levitical law. And just human nature in general, right? This is not what you're supposed to do. But Amnon, he sees his half-sister, and it says he loves her. Now, when it says the word love here, do you think it means 1 Corinthians 13 style love?
No.
No.
Yeah, probably not. This is one of those places where we have to recognize that Hebrew is a very limited language, right? It has a very limited vocabulary when it comes to things. And we see this actually in extent to English language as well, right? Where we use the word love to describe a bunch of different things, right? I love that lamp over there. I love the color blue. I love my mom. I mean the word love in 3 different ways whenever I said those 3 different phrases, right? The way that I love my God is different than the way that I love these running shorts. Totally different, right? I love God a lot more, hopefully, right? So love can be thrown around, used a lot of different ways. Right here, I think that it's very clear that his love for her is not exactly what the Bible means when it talks about love, right? Because first off, if he did love his sister in the biblical way, he probably would not do the things that he's about to do. Right? Because the best thing, even if he had this desire for her, the loving thing would be to deny himself that desire and not do anything. Right? And so whenever it says love here, think more along the lines of lust. Right? And he lusted after her. And Amnon was so tormented that he made himself ill because of his sister Tamar. For she was a virgin and it seemed impossible to Amnon to do anything to her. Alright, let's talk about that. So what's going on with Amnon?
His sexual desire for his half-sister Tamar.
Yes.
And it's making him feel so... it says it there, but it's just hard to describe the feeling. I think he's just so tormented.
Okay.
That he's like, I want to be with her, but I don't know how to carry it out.
Mm-hmm.
Like a sexual frustration?
Yeah. I mean, it's consuming it. It's like he's getting obsessive over it, right? He's just being... It's like this monster inside of him, just he just wants to be with her, and you can, don't step too deeply into his mind, but I think you're supposed to kind of step in there where it's he's just so consumed by the idea of being with her that it eventually becomes the only thing he can think about at any given moment, where literally it's making him sick, just the idea that he'll never be with her. And do you notice why? It doesn't say, it's because it's his half-sister. It's because she was a virgin and it seemed impossible to Amnon to do anything to her. Right? So the reason he was getting sick isn't him being oh no, I'm attracted to my sister. That should make you sick. You should be disgusted with yourself. But that's not why. It's because she's a virgin, and if she's a virgin, what does that probably imply about her, like, from a societal perspective back then? Pure, but what would the social dynamic be?
Well, she's much younger than him.
Much younger, probably. But what else? How would men and women often interact back then? Would they interact as freely as we do right now?
No, it's usually like you be father or something.
Well, yeah, usually there was like a middle person interacting with all this stuff. And she's a virgin, which means she's not just a virgin, she's a virgin princess, right? So she is one of the king's daughters, which means that she's probably well protected and always surrounded by people, right? And obviously very well separated from everybody else. She's not just walking around, she's not married, no, she is a virgin. Like, they are treasuring her, they are protecting her, right? So she's not alone a whole lot. So the reason he's getting sick is not because he's disgusted with himself. The reason he's getting sick is because he doesn't find an opportunity to release his lust upon her, right? She's a virgin, and therefore it seemed impossible to do anything to her. He's literally trying to think of ways to just get her alone, and he can't come up with anything. Is Amnon a type of person you want to be?
Nope.
Probably not, right? I mean, let's just, honestly, I'm not even going to say probably not. Just don't be an Amnon, right?
Don't be an Amnon.
And once again, firstborn son of David. This is technically the heir to the throne. Not a great look. Which once again highlights something that I've mentioned multiple times. There's not a lot of good fathers in this book, in 1st and 2nd Samuel. Eli was a bad father. Samuel was a bad father. David, a pretty bad father. The only one who seemed like a somewhat decent father, surprisingly, was Saul. And I don't even think it was that he was a decent father. I think it's just kids kind of worked out. They just kind of turned out all right, despite his efforts to the contrary. Right? But, so David, what's he been doing? Like, how did Amnon get here? Maybe Amnon was just a bad seed, but we're going to see that a lot of his kids are kind of corrupt. And so I don't know what David was doing during all this time. Maybe he was so focused on his establishing the kingdom that he was neglecting the kids. I don't know. But somehow Amnon got to this point where he's not even troubled by the fact that he's attracted to his half-sister. He's just troubled by the fact that he can't find a way to force himself upon her. Right? That is his biggest dilemma. Right? Like, this is sick stuff. But Amnon had a friend. Good for Amnon. Not good for Tamar. Whose name was Jonadab, the son of Shemaiah, David's brother. All right? Do the mental math in your head. What does this make Jonadab in relationship to Amnon?
Cousin?
Cousins. Yes, very good. So they're cousins, but they're also friends. Right? Because Amnon is David's son. David is Shemaiah's brother. And then Jonadab is Shemaiah's son. So they're cousins. Right? Amnon had a friend whose name was Jonadab, the son of Shemaiah, David's brother, and Jonadab was a very crafty man. What does that immediately make you think of?
He hurt his hands.
The serpent in the garden, right? Craftiness isn't always a bad thing, but whenever it's worded like that, in a very ominous way, probably a crafty thing, right? I mean, actually, we're called to be crafty, right? I don't know if like there's verses like where Jesus says we're supposed to be as shrewd as serpents, right? But as innocent as doves. And so craftiness can be a good thing. But when it's worded like this, it seems like a callback to the serpent in the garden. Right? Jonadab was very crafty. So what do you think Jonadab's going to do?
Probably something not good.
Yeah, he's probably going to do what the serpent did and make Eve's wildest dreams come true. But it's going to backfire. Right? Jonadab is going to make Amnon's wildest dreams come true, and he is going to give him access to the forbidden fruit. Yeah, you can see why it might be alluding back to the serpent, right? Because here Amnon is craving, I mean, literally, he's a prince. He could probably have whatever woman he wants, but he wants the one woman he can't have. Kind of like his father, right? David, with Bathsheba, right? He could have any woman, but he wants the one thing he can't have. Kind of like us. That's what we do, right? God gives us so much, yet we want the one thing we can't have. But Jonadab was crafty. And so he said to him, "O son of the king, why are you so haggard morning after morning? Will you not tell me?" To me, this sounds just like the serpent. Did God really say that you can't eat from any of the trees? Right? He's just like, oh, he's just instigating. Amnon, I can't help but notice that you look horrible day after day. Please tell me. Can I help? He's like, please tell me what's going on. And then Amnon's pretty honest with him. I mean, I probably wouldn't be that honest if somebody asked me about this. But, I mean, good for Amnon. I don't think it's good. But this is probably something you keep to yourself. But Amnon said to him, I love Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister. Do you notice what he calls Tamar here?
Sister.
Yeah.
His brother Absalom's sister. Dude, that's your sister too. I don't care if it's your half-sister. It's still your sister. Don't create that distinction, right? Y'all have the same dad. All because you have different moms does not make it okay, right? But he's doing what sinful humans do. They justify it. Well, she's not my direct sister. Still goes against the law. God still don't like it, right? But he's wording it in the most nice way possible. I love Tamar. I can't control it. The heart wants what the heart wants. God designed me this way. If he didn't want me to love Tamar, then why did he put her in the same palace as me? Like, you can just imagine the type of stuff he's saying to Jonadab right now. Jonadab said to him, notice how quickly Jonadab just comes up with a plan. He's like, dude, like it kind of gives you the impression that Jonadab's been here before, right? I'm not saying he has, but it seems like, I mean, we know that he was a crafty man, so he knows how to get things done. It's funny how if you get rid of the nad in between, you know what it spells? Joab.
It reminds me of Joab and David.
Yeah.
It's like David Uriah.
Yeah, it is kind of like Joab and David, Jonadab and Amnon. Just kind of funny. All right. Jonadab said to him, lie down on your bed and pretend to be ill. I wonder where this is heading. And when your father comes to see you, say to him, let my sister Tamar come and give me bread to eat, and prepare the food in my sight, that I may see it and eat from her hand. All right. So, what is Jonadab suggesting?
He thought it said, called her his sister a thing.
Yeah. Let my sister Tamar. Yeah. And Jonadab still doesn't have a problem with it, right? He's going to call it as it is, but he's still fine with it. He's like, hey, man, if you want to sleep with your sister, that's cool with me. Well, no, it's my brother Absalom's sister. Like I said, if you want to sleep with your sister, that's fine with me. It's like, okay. But what is Jonadab suggesting? What does he want Amnon to do?
To fake ill. Like, just to pretend that he's sick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fake like you're sick, and what's going to happen?
And then, Tamar's gonna come to his ill, quote unquote, and I don't know.
Yeah, well, first off, David's going to come check on him, right? Of course David's going to come check on his firstborn. And then, whenever David comes to check on him, he says, just casually ask him, do you think you can send Tamar to come take care of me? Right? And this is genius. Once again, Jonadab's crafty. He doesn't say, just right off the bat, ask for Tamar. No, instead, this looks like a humble son asking his father, Dad, you're the king. You don't need to trouble yourself. And you know what? Don't trouble any of the other sons as well. While I'm down, they need to help take care of things. Could you get my sister to just come take care of me, though? So Jonadab's crafty. He knows what he's doing, right? He's not saying just explicitly ask. No. Make it believable, right? Make it seem like you're really ill, and you can't do anything, and you don't want to bother your dad or your other brothers, but you do need somebody to take care of you. And Tamar, she's a virgin. She's unmarried. She doesn't have anything else to do. Right? She's just being protected by the palace guard. Perfect person to come take care of you. He's finding a way to get Amnon and Tamar alone. So when your father comes in, say to him, let my sister Tamar come and give me bread to eat, and prepare the food in my sight, that I may see it and eat it from her hand. Right? So make it clear, like, come be with me. Don't just like, oh yeah, go make the food and like send it over. No, like, I would just really appreciate being in my sister's presence. So Amnon lay down and pretended to be ill. He's like, all right, sounds good. I can do that. And when the king came to see him, listen, according to plan, and when the king came to see him, Amnon said to the king, please let my sister Tamar come and make a couple of cakes in my sight, that I may eat from her hand. Right, so he just takes, he just runs with it. And notice what he calls her there too. He calls her my sister as well. So now we've got even Amnon admitting who this is. Right? Do you think Absalom's going to be happy about this?
No.
Probably not. So just keep that in mind. There's another reason why it's been emphasizing that this is Absalom's sister. Because Amnon's not treating her like a sister, but Absalom cares for his sister very deeply. So keep that in mind. And so this is going perfectly to Jonadab's plan. David comes in, And he hears this. And real quick, what do you think from David's perspective?
He's angry.
Well, just from this right here.
Probably like, okay, you want your sister to take care of you? There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I mean, you would never expect this thing to happen, right? I mean, you might look at David and be like, David, don't let it happen. He doesn't know, right? Who's going to assume that their son wants to sleep with the stepsister, right? I mean, that's kind of weird stuff. I mean, David's seen some weird things in his life, but he's probably not expecting this. And so, innocent enough, might be kind of a weird request, but he's probably like, he's sick. You know what? Let's just give him what he wants, right? He's probably not thinking straight. And so that's what he asks. Let's see how the story unfolds.
Then David sent home to Tamar, saying, "Go to your brother Amnon's house and prepare food for him." So Tamar went to her brother Amnon's house, where he was lying down. And she took dough and kneaded it, and made cakes in his sight, and baked the cakes. And she took the pan and emptied it out before him. But he refused to eat. And Amnon said, "Send out everyone from me." So everyone went out from him. Then Amnon said to Tamar, "Bring the food into the chamber, that I may eat from your hand." And Tamar took the cakes she had made and brought them into the chamber to Amnon her brother. But when she brought them near him to eat, he took hold of her and said to her, "Come, lie with me, my sister." She answered him, "No, my brother, do not violate me, for such a thing is not done in Israel. Do not do this outrageous thing. As for me, where could I carry my shame? And as for you, would you be as one of the outrageous fools in Israel? Now therefore please speak to the king, for he will not withhold me from you." But he would not listen to her, and being stronger than she, he violated her and lay with her.
Yikes.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ew, more like it.
Do you notice how this story goes into a lot more detail than even the sin with David and Bathsheba? Right? It's almost like the author is slowing down and wants you to linger in the nastiness of what's going on here. Right? With David, whenever he sinned, it kind of just gave you the bare necessity stuff because it doesn't want you to leave the book with like a lingering bad taste on who David is. Right? Because in the end, even though David did horrible stuff, you want to leave it like reflecting on David like as the man after God's own heart. Right? So it doesn't want to tell you every gory little detail. Because it can tell you how like David's like mouth started salivating. It doesn't go into that because it doesn't want you to think about David that way, right? It wants you to know what he did and see how he repented. Amnon, though, I think it does want you to see the consequences of David's sin, right? And it does want you to see the depths of evil towards which David's sons fell. And I just think that's interesting, right? How it slows down. And y'all know me. The way that stories are told is very fascinating to me because it just communicates a lot about the message. Right? Because there's always things that, like, how you choose to tell a story will affect how it's interpreted. And you could very easily just be like, Amnon lusted after his sister and forced himself upon her. But it doesn't say that. Instead, it slows down. And it tells you every little detail. Which just kind of makes you, like, linger on it to where you're like, you're just grossed out the whole time. All right. Anything y'all want to point out before we start breaking it down? Cool. Then David sent home to Tamar, right? So apparently they were in like probably separate buildings, separate palaces or something like that. He sends home to Tamar, and he says, "Go to your brother Amnon's house and prepare food for him." Unintentionally, David is actually aiding in the sin, right? He doesn't know that, right? Yeah. Ironically, he's become the messenger. Remember back in chapter 11 how there were all these messengers going back and forth with the whole David and Bathsheba thing? David himself has become one of the messengers now, right? He is now the one helping Amnon unintentionally do this vile act. And so in many ways, he's actually almost handing his daughter over to the devil, right? It's kind of sad. So he tells Tamar, "Go to Amnon's house, prepare food for him." So Tamar went to her brother's Amnon's house where he was lying down. Another thing you need to notice is that unlike the Tamar in Genesis, this Tamar is really just portrayed as just an innocent girl, right? The Tamar in Genesis is also very crafty and very conniving. She probably didn't start out that way. She probably had to learn that through a hard life. But this Tamar is just innocent, and she just like, whatever dad says, I'm going to go do. Even her little speech thing at the end here, she seems like just a really good girl. And so it's even more heartbreaking to see what she goes through.
She knows the law.
She does. Yes, she does know the law. which means that Amnon has no excuse. Right? That means Amnon has heard it. And of course, being the son of David, of course he's heard it. It just makes you wonder. I mean, all because you teach somebody Scripture doesn't mean that they're going to live by it. So Tamar went to her brother Amnon's house, where he was lying down. And she took dough and kneaded it and made cakes in his sight and baked the cakes. Another thing that just kind of grosses me out here is it keeps repeating the phrase, in his sight, in his sight, in his sight. Right? And I don't know if that's it's got to be an intentional thing. But we know, what do we know about Tamar? She's beautiful. And we know that seems to be the main thing that Amnon knows about her, because she's a virgin, so she's been protected. He can't find any alone time with her. He probably doesn't know much about her beyond her beauty, right? He's probably just seen her from a distance and been like, wow, I like that sight, right? Really just viewing her as an object. And so he's probably never had, he probably doesn't have a lot of in-depth conversations with her beyond, like the dinner table or something. So he probably doesn't know her super well. He probably just knows her enough to know she's beautiful. And so even this simple act, she's tending to his needs, and she's making food for him, but it keeps emphasizing, in his sight, in his sight. Like you just imagine him laying there in bed, just lusting after her, even as she's making this food, right? I don't know, it's just a very, grimy picture. And so she's making this in his sight and baked the cakes, and she took the pan and emptied it out before him, but he refused to eat. I don't want to eat. Right? He's acting even more sick. Right? And Amnon said, send out everyone from me. Alright, so what is he trying to make it look like? What's he doing?
He wants it to be just him and Tamar.
Well, that is what he ultimately wants. But
It's almost like he has something to tell her.
yeah, it's like he's got something to tell her, or he's almost the way I read it is that he's almost he's a prince, and he's acting like he's embarrassed at how sick he is. It's like, no, I don't want anybody to see him. Get everybody out, right? Tamar, you can stay back, but I don't want anybody else seeing me this way. Send everybody out. I can't even eat, right? Just that's how sick he is, right? Sends everybody out. So everyone went out front. They listened. This is no good, right? Because they're just obeying what he's saying. But now Jonadab's plan is coming to fruition. Then Amnon said to Tamar, bring the food into the chamber that I may eat from your hand. Here he hasn't been eating. Now he's alone. Oh, Tamar, come a little bit closer. This just makes you want to punch this dude in the face, right? Like you're just wanting to step in there and be like, dude, better stop it. You're wanting to this is where you're going Big Brother mode and be like, don't touch Tamar. In many ways, you are tempted to be an Absalom, as we're going to see. So he says to her, bring the food into the chamber that I may eat from your hand. And Tamar took the cakes she had made and brought them into the chamber to Amnon her brother. You notice the repetition? It'll say, this is what is asked, and Tamar does. This is what is asked, and Tamar does. David asks Tamar to do something, she does it. Amnon asks her to do something, she does it. Right? She's just submitting. She's just the picture of just a perfectly innocent, beautiful, God-fearing woman. Right? That's the picture of this. And she's walking into the lion's den. But when she brought them near to eat, he took. Right? He took hold of her. There's that word that we've been trying to notice throughout the whole book. He took hold of her and said to her, come lie with me, my sister.
In the same sentence.
Yeah, in the same sentence. Yikes. I mean, especially if you're wanting this to actually happen consensually, maybe leave off the last two words. Just say, come lie with me. Don't emphasize the sister thing if you're wanting this to actually happen. I'm glad he said it to emphasize the fact that it shouldn't happen. This is just horrible, right? I mean, think about this poor girl, right? You have to step into the scene. She's blindsided by this. Right? She just, she's probably kind of confused because she's I don't know, why is Amnon wanting to all of a sudden be around me? I mean, I guess, okay. She's just taking care of her brother, just trying to tend to his needs. She thinks he's so sick that he can't eat. She thinks he's probably just super weak. Right? He just sent everybody else out. He's in a desperate situation. He might be near death. And he's inviting her over. Here, I can't even get up to get my food. Bring it over to me on the bed. And she comes over all innocent-like, and he's wanting to eat from her hand, and then he grabs her. And he says, lie with me. And all of a sudden, this poor innocent Tamar, all of a sudden, in a flash of a second, it all clicks. And she realizes he is not sick. I am not tending to him. I'm alone. And she's realizing, oh crap, this is not good, right? And like, what does she do in the situation, right? Like, how do you handle this? It's like it's just like all of a sudden it's like, oh no, like what can she do, right? Because all of a sudden it's her versus this guy who's probably well older than her and could easily overpower her, as we're going to see. She can't escape. She can't run away. If she calls for help, he'll deny it. And then she'll probably be shunned because back then, you're probably going to trust the guys over the girls, sadly. This is a horrible situation. And this is why the virgins would be protected. To keep people from situations like this. But Amnon has sneaked his way into the perfect situation. So she does the best she can, and she tries to argue reason with him. However, does he care about reason? Does he care about logic?
Nope.
What does he care about?
Only himself.
Himself and satisfying his desires. That's the sad part, right? You can speak logic to somebody who is wanting to sin, and it's not going to do anything, right? I've had friends do this to me, where there was one time where I had a friend call me and was like, "Hey, David, you're doing something really stupid," and I was like, "Yeah, I know." And I look back on that, I'm like, "Wow, that was a really good friend, and I was stupid," and he was right. You can't talk logic to a person who is choosing to sin. You can't do it, right? But she's going to try, because that's all she can do. She answered him, "No, my brother, do not violate me," right? Notice the language she's using. She doesn't say, "Do not lie with me. Do not violate me," because that's what you're doing. If you're doing this, it is not okay. You're going to be violating me. You're going to be forcing yourself upon me, because I am not doing this consensually. "Do not violate me, for such a thing is not done in Israel." So what is her first defense?
It's not done in Israel.
Okay, so what is her main point there?
It's against the law.
It's against the law, right? We are God's holy people. We do not do these things. Not to mention the fact that it's just nasty, right? We are God's people. We are the people of Israel. This thing is not tolerated. Our Father is the king. He has established God's holy kingdom. This is not okay. Do not do this outrageous thing. You can see the language she's using is like, it's not gentle, right? He's over here like, lie with me. She's like, don't violate me. Don't be outrageous. As for me, where could I carry my shame? Right? She's saying, okay, beyond this, think about what you would be doing to me if you did this. Right? She's highlighting his selfishness. Because what's going to happen to her if he does this?
Less likely to get married.
Yeah, because nowadays in our culture, people are afraid to get married if they're still virgins, which is weird. But biblically speaking, you're supposed to be a virgin until you're married, right? Like that's the ideal, right? And this isn't just biblically speaking. In cultures at large, like up until recent centuries, that was the ideal. And if you were not a virgin, your chances of getting married went downhill quick because you were either, sadly, there's the aspect of being like people are considered almost soiled goods, which is unfortunate. But there's also the aspect of just the moral, like, did you choose to do this, right? There's all these different components going into it. That's why the birth of Jesus is scandalous, right? Because Mary's pregnant without ever having known a person, but nobody else believes that, right? Everybody else is like, I don't know. Usually virgins don't get pregnant, right? That's why it was so scandalous, because this is unheard of. And so she says, like, think about this. Like, where could I carry my shame? Like, I'm a princess, but like she's living, like her only hope of having like a normal life is getting married one day to some prince and like having some political alliance and living with him. But if you take this from me, what life do I have? I can't go anywhere. Like, you are stealing my life from me through this one act. And so he's over here saying, I love my sister, and she's kind of highlighting, no, you don't. If you do this to me, the only thing you're doing is satisfying yourself for a few moments, and you're ruining my life forever. Are you going to do that to me, Amnon, my brother? It's outrageous. And as for you, you would be as one of the outrageous fools in Israel. She repeats the word outrageous. But she also calls him what?
A fool.
A fool. Do you remember what the word fool is in Hebrew? We talked about this. It's actually going to be something that's relevant in a few minutes. Nabal. Remember? Abigail and Nabal? Remember? Yeah. You'd be a Nabal. You'd be a fool. Because it would show that he's not a man of principle either. Now, therefore, please speak to the king, for he will not withhold me from you. What does she mean by this?
Does it mean that he's supposed to talk to David about her, or?
Well, that's what she's suggesting. She's saying, just go talk to Dad, and he won't hold me back from you. Do you think that's actually what David would do? Probably not. I think she's just trying to get out of the situation.
Yeah.
She's like, you know what? You know what? I might be fine with this if Dad says okay. Just go talk with Dad, and we'll figure it out. Because she knows David would not give consent to this, right? I think she's just trying to get out of the situation. And to her, that's her best bet. Don't just outright reject him. Rather than just accusing him of being totally stupid, just suggest that the main issue is that he didn't get consent from Dad, right? So I think that's her tactic here, because if she just outright calls him just a total idiot, then he's just going to get mad and violate her. She's actually pretty smart. Her one tactic is, you know what? Let's just act like there's a different issue here. Get Dad's consent, and we'll consider it. But that's not enough for him, because he probably also knows that Dad would never consent to this, and he doesn't want to wait any longer. Right? He's been waiting long enough. Right? He's finally got her alone. He's going to do what he's wanted to do. But he would not listen to her, and being stronger than she, he violated her and lay with her. It even emphasizes the fact that it's because he's stronger, right? It could just say, but he would not listen to her and he violated her and lay with her. But it emphasizes the fact why, which implies that she put up a fight, which is even more heartbreaking, right? It's not like she was just like, okay, if you're going to do it, just do it. No, it says because he was stronger. That means she tried to get away. She tried hard to get away, but he's the bigger guy. And it's just a graphic image, right? This is heartbreaking stuff. We move on.
Then Amnon hated her with very great hatred, so that the hatred with which he hated her was greater than the love with which he had loved her. And Amnon said to her, "Get up, go." But she said to him, "No, my brother, for this wrong in sending me away is greater than the other that you did to me." But he would not listen to her. He called the young man who served him and said, "Put this woman out of my presence and bolt the door after her." Now she was wearing a long robe with sleeves, for thus were the virgin daughters of the king dressed. So his servant put her out and bolted the door after her. And Tamar put ashes on her head and tore the long robe that she wore. And she laid her hand on her head and went away, crying aloud as she went. And her brother Absalom said to her, "Has Amnon your brother been with you? Now hold your peace, my sister. He is your brother. Do not take this to heart." So Tamar lived, a desolate woman, in her brother Absalom's house. When King David heard of all these things, he was very angry. But Absalom spoke to Amnon neither good nor bad, for Absalom hated Amnon because he had violated his sister Tamar.
All right. Yes?
No, I'm thinking.
Okay. So let's just start with this first verse. Then Amnon hated her with very great hatred, so that the hatred with which he hated her was greater than the love with which he had loved her. What's happened here?
He hated her more than when he lusted for her. Yes.
Yeah. What made the big difference?
I think that
She did not want to do it with him.
Well, he still really wanted to be with her a second ago when she didn't want to do it.
after he saw that he didn't get anything from it, he hated her because of not fulfilling his desire.
I think it's actually that
something sort of
like
that.
it's along the lines of what you're saying, but I think the way I would word it is that his desire was fulfilled. That's what happened. His desire was fulfilled, and now it's time to move on. Right? In many ways, it's kind of like a cheeseburger. right? I like to think of it that way, right? There have been so many times I have craved cheeseburgers. I just hunger for it. I'm so hungry, and then I have it, and I get so stuffed that I hate myself. And I'm like, I hate that stupid cheeseburger. I wish I'd never touched that stupid cheeseburger. Right? I'm gonna have salads for the rest of my life.
It would be better if it had pickles on it.
No.
Amen.
No, but you see what I'm saying there? Right? You think you know what you want, and then you overindulge, and you hate it. That's what's happened here.
It's
Right?
almost like seeing the shame and guilt.
That's exactly
It's
what
like
it is.
looking upon your
Right.
shame and guilt.
It is the shame and guilt coming back to bite him in the butt.
Yep.
Right? He lusted after her and called it love. And now he has made love to her, aka forced himself upon her, and now he's confronted by this beaten and broken woman before him, who's probably weeping and probably bloody and bruised. She doesn't look nearly as beautiful as she did before. Right? Yeah, he's satisfied his urges. It's not even... See, now he's actually thinking clearly. Right now, his desires have been fulfilled, and he's seeing clearly for the first time, and he's like, you know what? I don't even know what I saw in you in the first place. Now he's actually, like, if anything, he's being honest now. Right? Because now he's actually expressing the hatred which he just treated her with. Ironically, it's flipped. Right? Whenever he claimed to love her, he did the hateful thing. And now that he feels hatred towards her, he's doing the loving thing and actually allowing her to leave. Right? And so it's actually kind of flip-flopped. Right? Because that's what sin does to you. And so he satisfied his urges, and now he's looking upon her, and all he does is feel disgust because her just laying there is a reminder of his guilt and his sin. Right? Ugh. Like, get away from my presence. Now it probably starts clicking in his head, oh, you're my half-sister. What have I done? Oh, the sooner you can get away from me, I don't want to see you again. Like, no, get away. Right? It's horrible. So Amnon says to her, get up, go. And now, once again, poor Tamar here. This man, over the course of a few short minutes, she was literally taking care of him. Notice that, right? She was tending to his needs. She was showing him hesed. And then he abused it, right? And he forced her to tend to wants, right? Which he thought were needs. And now he's depriving her of a future. And she says to him, no, my brother, for this wrong in sending me away is greater than the other you did to me. Right? Because according to the law, if a man violates a woman, even if it's a situation like this, he has the duty to take care of that woman going forward. Because he has ruined her reputation and her life forever. And so according to the law, if you've done that, you better repent of what you've done and take care of her. The last thing you do is abandon this woman. If you were so bold as to, that's why the law is very protective of women, right? And of slaves, right? It takes care of the people who would typically be oppressed. And if you were so bold as to take away this woman's reputation and livelihood, then you have the moral responsibility to take care of her. And so she's saying, Amnon, if you were going to do this, you can't leave me now. You've stolen everything from me. But he would not listen to her. He called the young man who served him and said, put this woman out of my presence and bolt the door after her. This is something, it's literally something that seems like it'd be straight out of Game of Thrones or something. It's just like some lust-filled prince. Now he's not even hiding it, right? He just told everybody to get out just so he could do this deed. And now he just calls somebody in, get in here. Get the woman out, right? She's probably laying there still in the bed. Drag her out. Go. Get her away from me. I don't want to see her anymore. He's just like a snobby little entitled prince. Now she was wearing a long robe with sleeves, for thus were the virgin daughters of the king dressed. Some translations might say a multicolored robe, kind of like Joseph, It could be either one. The translation's kind of weird there. She was wearing a long robe with sleeves, for thus were the virgin daughters of the king dressed. So I guess it was kind of just a way of knowing what women were available, right? They would dress them in certain ways so you knew, oh, that woman is, somebody who could be courted. So his servant put her out and bolted the door after her. The servant just obeys, right? Amnon's getting everything he wants. What he asks for, he receives. And Tamar put ashes on her head and tore the long robe that she wore. And she laid her hand on her head and went away, crying aloud as she went. What is she doing?
Weeping.
Yeah.
Almost like mourning.
Mourning, right? These are signs of grief, right? This is what you would do if you're grieving. You rip your clothes, you put ashes on your head. In many ways, she feels as though she has just died, right? She went in there to take care of her dying brother, and she is the one who died in there, right? So she leaves, and now she is basically the Walking Dead. Like, she's mourning the loss of her virginity, and with the loss of her virginity in that culture, she has no future, right? Honestly, it's almost even worse if you're a princess, right? Because if you were just some other woman, well, there's plenty of other things to happen, but the princesses were typically protected, right? If a princess had lost her virginity, then, oh man, then this is either a very corrupt kingdom or she is a very loose, like just all the different things that can be said here is just worse. And so you just feel nothing but like just sorrow for this girl and what she's gone through. And her brother Absalom said to her, "Has Amnon, your brother, been with you?" It's almost like Absalom knows Amnon pretty well, right? He just sees how Tamar's acting, and he just says, "It was Amnon, wasn't it?" I don't know how he knows this. Maybe it's probably not Amnon's first time doing something like this, which is the first time he's done it with the sister, right? I don't know. But as soon as Absalom sees, he knows. You think he's happy? No. And you can't blame him, right? Like, that's one thing we need to understand. Absalom, later in the story, is going to be a very bad guy. But you kind of start out rooting for him, don't you? Because he has a thirst for vengeance, which inherently we all do. The issue is that, who does vengeance belong to? God. And what should justice be administered by? Yeah. Who should administer justice? God or the government?
The king.
Right? The king. Right? The king should be the one to handle the problems. The issue is that we're going to see that the king doesn't handle the problem.
It's kind of like Joab when he went behind the king's back.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what's going to happen. And that's what I'm saying. David's going to just be a passive reactive to this. Like, David could do things to prevent it, but he doesn't. Has Amnon, your brother, been with you? Now hold your shalom, my sister, your peace. He is your brother. Do not take this to heart. It sounds like Absalom's downplaying it, but what we're going to see is that he's not. He's just saying, this is code word for saying, I'll take care of this. You don't need to worry about anything. I've got your back. He is your brother, but I got this. Like, if anything, he's just trying to comfort her. Say, don't worry, it's fine. It'll be okay. Don't let this ruin your life. It's okay. Just get the ashes off your head. It's fine. But in his head, he's mad. So Tamar lived a desolate woman in her brother Absalom's house. He takes her in and cares for her. When King David heard of all these things, he was very angry.
Should be.
Good for you, David. And kind of like Eli, right? Whenever Eli heard about all of his finagling sons doing all their stuff, he rebuked them, but what else did he do? David doesn't do anything here. Why do you think that is?
He sees what he did.
Maybe. That's probably what I would think. I would think that maybe David hears what's happened, and he's furious. He can't believe Amnon's done that. But the guilt of what he did is also fresh on his mind. And he says, can I really get on to Amnon for doing this whenever what I did was so much worse? And you know what the answer is? Yes, you can get on to them, right? If you're a parent and your kid is going around making stupid choices, I don't care if you made those same stupid choices. If anything, that gives you more reason to get on to them. Because you can say, hey, buddy boy, I did those same stupid choices and it didn't work out for me.
He already lost his one son because of it.
Yes.
It should be more of a reason.
Yeah. He already lost one son, but I think there's plenty of things that could be going on in David's mind. One, I think that probably the main thing is him just talking himself out of it because he'd feel like a hypocrite. And that's mainly just because we know David's heart, and it seems like that's something that David would linger on a little bit, and his sin would grieve him so much that he almost wouldn't think rationally in how to handle the situation. He would be so convicted by his own sin that he would silence himself when really he should speak up. But then also, he knows that this is also the consequences of his sin. And so he might be kind of adopting that kind of fatalistic approach that Eli had. You know, the Lord's going to do what the Lord's going to do. This is what I asked for. He might even feel like he bears the responsibility, so maybe Amnon's not the one who needs to be rebuked. Maybe he is. Right? So there's plenty of things that be going on in David's head, but he should have done something. Right? You are the king, and you are his father. And you are Tamar's father. So he should have done something here, but he did not, which is not a good look. Right? Once again, David's still a great guy, but he's not perfect. And one issue, and that's what I'm saying, he's going to be largely reactionary. He's angry, but he's not taking the initiative. He's not going to actually do things until it's a little bit too late. And we're going to see him be faithful to God, but he's no longer that, like, he doesn't have, like, that oomph. You know, he doesn't have the thing that he once had. This sin with Bathsheba thing really just wrecked him. To where he really is just a shell. Like, whenever David is just a shell of his former self, he's still better than all of us. I just want to say that. But he is a shell of his former self. So Tamar lived a desolate woman in her brother Absalom's house. When King David heard of all these things, he was very angry. I believe there's also some other, I think like the Septuagint includes like an extra little phrase there that accentuates the fact that it says, but he did nothing, despite the fact that he don't, it does something to emphasize the fact that David did nothing, right? Which you kind of already see implied. But Absalom spoke to Amnon neither good nor bad. For Absalom hated Amnon because he had violated his sister Tamar. That's a curious phrase to say. So
that makes why would you say neither good or bad?
Yeah. Why would Absalom say neither good nor bad? If he hates him, shouldn't he just be going saying bad stuff?
Doesn't want him to catch on.
Yeah. Unless he's got something cooking in the background that he doesn't want Amnon to know about. Right? That's the only reason, right? If he hates Amnon, most people would just go up and say, dude, I hate you, and what you did to my sister is no good. The only reason you would say neither good nor bad is because you've got a long-term goal here. And you are choosing to stay silent. And that's what you have to understand with Absalom. Jonadab wasn't the only crafty person in this story. And Absalom seems like a good guy, but he's also very serpent-like. So just keep that in mind.
Also, my translation says like that added part at the bottom, and it says, but he did not grieve the spirit of Amnon, his son, for he loved him because he was his firstborn.
Oh, so that's the from Septuagint
like
thing?
Added, yeah.
Yeah, so he did not grieve, repeat it?
But he did not grieve the spirit of Amnon, his son, for he loved him because he was his firstborn.
Okay, yeah, so he's angry, but he's not, like, grieving over, like, how bad what Amnon, like, he's frustrated at the situation, but he's not really as mad at Amnon as he should be, because Amnon's his firstborn, and it's like, that's his boy. Which is kind of messed up, right? But so that's what some later manuscripts have in there. I think that this is probably the original reading. I think that that's probably like a later commentator who like probably added that in. But yeah, so Absalom, he's pretty bad, and unlike David, he's going to do something about it. Unfortunately, it should be flipped, right? Absalom should be mad, but like David, he should let his fury stay there. Whereas David should be both mad and be willing to do something about it. And it shouldn't be something that just he leaves cooking. He should take immediate action and honestly either force them to somehow, I don't know if you would force them to marry or what. I have to like look at the Levitical law to figure out exactly what you do in a situation like that. I mean, they've already like kind of, I don't know. I don't know what you would do there. But you either do that or you inflict the death penalty on Amnon. Right? Because whenever somebody does something like that, they can receive the death penalty. Right? And so David should figure out something to do there, but he doesn't. We move on.
After 2 full years, Absalom had sheep shearers at Baal Hazor, which is near Ephraim, and Absalom invited all the king's sons. And Absalom came to the king and said, Behold, your servant has sheep shearers. Please let the king and his servants go with your servant. But the king said to Absalom, No, my son, let us not all go, lest we be burdensome to you. He pressed him, but he would not go, but gave him his blessing. Then Absalom said, If not, please let my brother Amnon go with us. And the king said to him, "Why should he go with you?" But Absalom pressed him until he let Amnon and all the king's sons go with him. Then Absalom commanded his servants, "Mark when Amnon's heart is merry with wine, and when I say to you, 'Strike Amnon,' then kill him. Do not fear. Have I not commanded you? Be courageous and be valiant." So the servants of Absalom did to Amnon as Absalom had commanded. Then all the king's sons arose, and each mounted his mule and fled. While they were on the way, news came to David, "Absalom has struck down all the king's sons, and not one of them is left." Then the king arose and tore his garments and lay on the earth. And all his servants who were standing by tore their garments. But Jonadab, the son of Shemaiah, David's brother, said, "Let not my lord suppose that they have killed all the young men, the king's sons, for Amnon alone is dead. For by the command of Absalom this has been determined from the day he violated his sister Tamar. Now therefore let not my lord the king so take it to heart as to suppose that all the king's sons are dead, for Amnon alone is dead."
Alright, so before we actually go through this, let's think back to 2 Samuel 11. David and Bathsheba. Overall story, let's just think about how it played out. David sees a woman he finds beautiful, right? He calls her over to his house, and he sleeps with her. Who does that sound a lot like in this chapter? Amnon, right? That's what Amnon did. He saw a beautiful woman, called her over, slept with her. Alright? Now, moving on into the story, David sends messengers to retrieve somebody, and they retrieve the person, and he gets the person drunk, and shortly after getting the person drunk, he also sends messengers to eventually have this person killed. Who does that sound like? Absalom. Do you see how this chapter mirrors chapter 11?
Yep.
But two of David's sons are now in David's place. Right? So literally David is, like the sons are following in the father's footsteps. Amnon is the lustful side, and Absalom is the violent side. Right? They're both committing the sins of their father. And they're both doing the same things. And as this is going on, you can't help but know that David's realizing this is my story playing out in my sons. Which is heartbreaking. I mean, parents have to do this all the time. Parents have to see their kids committing the same vices that they committed. Right? But David, he's got special insight on this. Right? And he knew this was going to happen ever since he committed it. And keep in mind, that was probably 10 years earlier. And now he's seeing it happen. And he's probably thinking, what have I done? What can I do?
Especially in verse 30.
Yeah.
Or 31.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah, tore his garments lay on the earth. Yeah. I've been here before.
I was thinking back to the paying fourfold and stuff, it's like all the sons are dead.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, that's what he thought. And,
That's what he thought, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Notice Absalom's patience, though. Right? After 2 full years, Absalom had sheep shearers at Baal Hazor, which is near Ephraim. And Absalom invited all the king's sons. Sheep shearing. We've heard about that before. Where was that?
Was it in 1 Samuel?
It wasn't 1 Samuel. It's a story we already talked about today, too. I made a brief reference to it.
Is that what David did when he was a shepherd?
Yes. Well, no. Actually, David would have done this, but it has to do with David doing something.
We're talking about with Nabal?
Nabal. Yes. Once again, Nabal and Abigail. Remember? That was during the whole sheep shearing thing, and that's why David got so mad. Because it was the sheep shearing season, and Nabal had all this stuff going on, and David was mad because he didn't get payment. And so he goes in there, and he's about to kill this dude, and then Abigail comes out and says, no, please, don't do that. Don't do that. It's all right. He's a fool. He's a Nabal. And so we've heard about sheep shearing before, and now it shows up again. And if you remember from last time, we talked about this. Sheep shearing was basically party central, right? This was the if you go to College Station during tailgating, in football season, that's what this is. It is a huge party. Sheep shearing back then, it is a huge deal. Especially with their economy, being so much on sheep and stuff. This was the place to be. Huge parties would be thrown. So 2 full years have passed, and this whole time Absalom has had this festering hatred for Amnon growing inside of him. He's seen his sister Tamar living in his house, going day by day, just desolate on her own, deprived of a future. And he's down there, and Absalom decides to invite all the king's sons. He doesn't even need a Jonadab to help him with his conspiracy. Right? That's the thing. Absalom, you're kind of rooting for him at this point because you really want Amnon to get what he deserves. But you have to realize that Absalom's the scarier figure. Because Amnon needed somebody else to help him conspire. Absalom's doing this all on his own. And if we're calling back to the sheep shearing thing with David, was that one of David's best moments?
No.
No. Was that Nabal's best moment? No. Right? And so both of the male figures that we have in that story were not thinking correctly at that time. And so if we're just looking at the parallels, even though his thirst is for vengeance here, that was also David's thirst back in that story. And Abigail came in and stopped him. Nobody's going to stop Absalom here. Right? And so once again, you have to notice the repetitive themes. And Absalom came to the king and said, "Behold, your servant has sheep shearers. Please let the king and his servants go with your servant." See how he's being crafty? Right? So what's he doing?
Deception? Like
Kind of.
using deception?
He's just not showing all his cards. So what does he ask David?
He's asking for him and is it him and his sons, or is it just him and like his servants going with Absalom?
Yeah, just basically everybody. Just get everybody. Hey, Dad, I've got a bunch of sheep shearers down there. Everybody come and just come party with us. Like, just like it's gonna be a great time. Like, just get everybody and come down here. Does he expect David to actually take him up on this? No. David is a king. He has other stuff to do. Maybe back when he was a shepherd, he would have gone and done this stuff. When he was a fugitive, he definitely would have been there. Here, no, he's got other stuff he's got to do. He can't just get up and get all of his servants and just go party. Right? So Absalom knows that that's not going to happen. But that's not his end goal. He actually would prefer David to not be there. Because what he's going to do, he needs David to not be there for. Right? So he's once again playing it very smart. It's kind of just like the Amnon thing, right? Hey, Dad, I don't want, like, it's really the reverse almost, right? Dad, I don't want you to have to be here. You know what? Just send Tamar, right? It's the reverse of it. But the king said to Absalom, "No, my son, let us not all go, lest we be burdensome to you." Right? So David's being considerate. He's like, "Son, we would go. We just don't want to, like, I got a lot of friends. And I don't want to trouble you. That's way too much for you to have to handle. I got plenty of stuff here in Jerusalem to take care of. I would not want to burden you like that." You also get the idea that Absalom just knew his dad's character, and that his dad would probably be considerate like that as well. He pressed him. Like, notice that. He pressed him. That's how confident Absalom is in this. He just knows his dad so well that he doesn't just take no for an answer. "Dad, no, like, really, no, you should come. You really should. Please, Dad, I'm begging you. You sure? Okay, well, if you insist, at least send Amnon. Right? That's the least you can do. Just send your firstborn." He pressed him, but he would not go, but gave him his blessing. He's like, "Son, no's no. I want to be there. I'm not going to go. I don't want to be a burden to you. But you have my blessing, and you and your friends, y'all going to have a great time at this sheep shearing party. Y'all have a great time." Then Absalom said, "If not, please let my brother Amnon go with us." And this is where David almost catches him. Right? Because so far Absalom's doing pretty good. Like, just like kind of, like this is a believable request. If anything, this is actually a more expected request than the Tamar thing. Right? The Tamar thing's kind of like, why do you want to be here with your sister? That's weird. This actually makes sense, right? Well, Dad, if you can't come, at least send your firstborn. Right? And the king said to him, "Why should he go with you?" What do you think David's thinking?
He's suspicious of Absalom.
Yeah, and why would he be suspicious?
Because they're not supposed to like each other.
Well, no. Well, yeah, kind of. He knows that Absalom hasn't said anything good or bad against Amnon, but David's no idiot. He knows what happened 2 years ago. And Absalom, you haven't been wanting to hang out with your brother at all lately. And now you're wanting to invite him to a place where I'm not? Why should he go? That's kind of weird. What are you asking for? And it seems like he's, we see some of the cleverness of David coming back in there. Lately, David's been kind of not as perceptive to things. But right here, to his credit, he's more perceptive. Because the Tamar thing, it was a weird request, but he didn't have any reason to be suspicious. Here he does. Here he's like, well, this guy violated your sister. So I don't know, like, I could be wrong, but maybe putting y'all two in the same room together in a place where I can't, like, oversee that, maybe that's not the smartest choice. And so he's like, why should I let him go with you? But Absalom pressed him, right? Dad, no, that thing's in the past. Like, don't worry about it. I just want to hang out with my brother. I haven't been with him for a while. My big bro. Let's just send him on over. Come on. He pressed him until he let Amnon and all the king's sons go with him. You can probably see that's probably where he threw the king's sons in there. Well, it's not. I don't just hang out with Amnon. No, send the other sons too. It's just all of y'all. I was just saying, if you can't come, just send Amnon, right? No, send all of them. Come on. Absalom's just pressing him, right? He pressed him. Even before we get to later on with Absalom and what he's going to do, what have we already seen him do twice, just in the last like 2 verses?
That word pressed?
Pressed.
Like
All right,
pressed him.
and why is he doing that? Like, what is the imagery? What is he trying to do?
Trying to get David to change his mind.
Get David to change his mind. He's trying to get what he wants, right? That's a good summary of Absalom's character. He is a guy who likes to get what he wants, right? He wants vengeance. He's going to get vengeance. Later on, he is going to want the people's favor. He's going to get the people's favor. Later on, he's going to want David's kingdom. He's going to get David's kingdom. And David's going to have to flee, right? And so just keep that in mind. He's pressing. This is who Absalom is. That's where repetition is very helpful. But Absalom pressed him until he let Amnon and all the king's sons go with him. Then Absalom commanded his servants. Notice, once again, he doesn't get his hands dirty, right? Mark when Amnon's heart is merry with wine. Just keep an eye out. Whenever he gets drunk, right? Kind of like David did with Joab, except now it's like being compressed, right? Mark when Amnon's heart is merry with wine, and when I say to you, strike Amnon, then kill him. Do not fear. Have I not commanded you? Be courageous and valiant. Everybody's like, you want us to kill the heir apparent? You want us to kill, like, the firstborn son of the king? And he's like, guys, I'm Absalom. I wouldn't lead you astray. If I told you to do it, I obviously have a reason to do it. I mean, you don't have anything to be afraid of. I'll take the blame. I'm the one who told you to do it. You got nothing to worry about. I commanded you. All you got to do is make sure he dies. Right? So Absalom, he's pretty manipulative too. Right? Just be strong and valiant. Courageous and valiant. So the servants of Absalom did to Amnon as Absalom had commanded. There you go. Amnon is dead. So, I wonder if sleeping with Tamar was worth it. Because he's dead now. And, yeah. Then all the king's sons arose, and each mounted his mule and fled. Yeah, I'd imagine so. Right? They probably, I don't even know how much they know about all this stuff. I don't know if they kept the whole Tamar thing, like, relatively secret. I don't know. We know that David knew about it. We know Absalom knew about it. I'm imagining other people knew about it. But David's sons, they all came here for a party, and now they just see a bunch of servants get up and kill their oldest brother. And they're probably thinking, is this a coup? What's going on? They don't know if this is, like, they have no idea this is Absalom doing this. Right? They're like, what the heck? They get up, they're gone. Right? They are fleeing for their lives. While they were on their way, right? So while they are still fleeing and trying to get back to David, news came to David. Absalom has struck down all the king's sons and not one of them is left. Fake news. Yeah, so what is the report that David hears?
All of them are dead.
Yeah, they're all dead. And now, once again, Sean pointed this out earlier. How do you think David's reacting to this?
Mad. Yeah. Frustrated.
More than that.
Disappointed.
More than that.
Very grieved.
Grieved. All of my sons are dead? What type of party was this?
I guess all but one if Absalom killed them. But...
Well, yeah. Absalom has struck down all the king's sons. Not one of them is left. I only have Absalom left.
It's like his favorite son, like, oh no, there's one still alive. Ah, dang
it. Which one? Absalom. You sure it's not Solomon? Dang. All right. What about Nathan? No. You sure it was okay? Yeah. No. So, the news is partially true, partially false. Yes, Absalom is the guilty party. I wonder at what point they figured that out. Probably the servants snitched, right? That's what I imagine. The servants were like, this thing probably blows out of proportion. Like, Absalom told us to do it, and so they figure out Absalom's done this. And by the time the report gets to David, it is way blown out of proportion. All your sons are dead. Not one is left. Not one. Then the king arose and tore his garments and lay on the earth. Second time we've seen somebody tearing their garments, just in this one chapter. That's kind of a good foreshadowing of David's life to come. And all the servants who were standing by tore their garments. Right? I mean, if you think about this, it sounds almost like what Saul went through. Right? They're thinking like all of Saul's sons died on one day, and then Saul killed himself. Right? This sounds like the end of a kingdom. And that is what David's confronted by for just a few moments, where he's thinking, oh my, I mean, if you just think about this, God has promised him an eternal dynasty. And if Absalom is his only heir, that's not looking very promising. And so in many ways, this almost like whenever these few moments when David hears this, it almost sounds like God has failed his covenant. God has failed his promises. And in many ways, God has failed a lot of stuff. And David would have to realize that this all falls on him. Because it's not that God doesn't exist. It would mean that God has abandoned him. Which is the flip opposite of Psalm 51. Right? But Jonadab, the son of Shemaiah, David's brother, said, let not my lord suppose that they've killed all the young men, the king's sons, for Amnon alone is dead. It's like, okay, doesn't make it better. But, I mean, I guess it does make it better, but, like, I don't know. I don't even know how you react to something like this. Don't worry, they're not all dead. They're not. Just Amnon. Yay? Like, I don't know. Like, how do you react to this news? But who's speaking?
Amnon's cousin.
Amnon's cousin. The one who literally got this whole thing started. Right? He is the one who helped Amnon achieve his lust. And now he is the one who's reporting the news of Amnon's death to David. And does he seem that troubled by it? No. He's just like this conniving figure in the background. He wasn't actually looking out for Amnon or anything. He just wanted to cause trouble. He's probably just having a great time. He's like, oh, this is like, he's just like here for the drama of it all. He's like, Amnon, I can help you sleep with your sister. Sure. And then like, oh, David, no. It's just Amnon who's dead. No, nothing to worry about. Like, he doesn't care. He's just like, oh, David, don't worry about it. It seems like he's really just trying to advance himself, right? Ooh, I'll suck up to Amnon to see if like I can get something there. Ooh, Amnon's dead, sucking up to David, right? He's more just like that guy maneuvering things in the background trying to advance himself. Let not my lord suppose that they've killed all the young men, the king's sons, for Amnon alone is dead. For by the command of Absalom, this has been determined from the day he violated his sister Tamar. Way to throw Amnon under the bus there. I noticed how he didn't mention that it was his idea. Right? It doesn't say, this has been determined from the day that he listened to my advice and violated his sister Tamar. No, he leaves that part out. He says, hey, I'm just saying Amnon had this coming ever since he did that stuff with Tamar. Jonadab, you're the one who told him, oh, no, I didn't. I didn't tell him to do that. This dude's just like a snake. Oh, well, that's funny. He's the serpent, right? He's crafty. Yeah, but I don't know. This is pretty messed up, you know? I don't know. I think we know people like this, though, right? The guy had that coming. Didn't you tell him to do that? We don't need to talk about that.
I didn't make him do it.
I didn't make him do it. I mean, yeah, I suggested it. I said, like, if you want to, and if you feel like you got to, this is how you would go about it, hypothetically. But I did not hold a sword against his neck and make him do it. It's like, that's who this guy is. So stupid. For by the command of Absalom, this has been determined from the day he violated his sister Tamar. Now therefore, let not my lord the king so take it to heart as to suppose that all the king's sons are dead, for Amnon alone is dead. He says, king, you don't even need to be that mad. It's just Amnon who's dead, and he had it coming. Probably not the best way to, like, comfort somebody, but, you know.
Not the first time someone's come to David like that.
Yeah, probably not. And David's not going to react nearly as strongly as he once did. Right? Normally he'd probably be like, you gonna die. Like, this is messed up. But
he's probably wondering why he knows that. The king would, how do you know
that? Yeah. Jonadab, you seem to be privy to a lot of very private information from a lot of conspiracies. Were you by chance involved? Sweat started pouring down Jonadab's face. All right, Sean, read the final few verses for us so we can wrap this up.
But Absalom fled, and the young man who kept the watch lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, many people were coming from the road behind him by the side of the mountain. And Jonadab said to the king, Behold, the king's sons have come. As your servant said, so it has come about. And as soon as he had finished speaking, behold, the king's sons came and lifted up their voice and wept. And the king also, and all his servants, wept very bitterly. But Absalom fled, and went to Talmai the son of Ammihud, king of Geshur. And David mourned for his son day after day. So Absalom fled, and went to Geshur, and was there 3 years. And the spirit of the king longed to go out to Absalom, because he was comforted about Amnon, since he was dead.
Jonadab's such a little punk.
See, told you so. They're all fine.
Yeah. Well, yeah, he's sucking up to him. He's like, I told you. It's like he's expected to be promoted or something. Oh, thanks. Only one of my sons is dead. Here's a crown. No, like, I don't know. This guy just annoys me. Like, just because he's not even that prominent of a figure in scripture. He just like shows up, and he just has like a very like, I don't know what this guy looked like, but I imagine him as having a very punchable face. You know what I mean? Right? Like, I've never punched a person in my life other than like when I did martial arts. But like, I've never like gotten in a fight with somebody. But this seems like one of those people like just like, you know, you look at him and you're like, man, I'm not saying I'm gonna punch you, but like, your face and my fist would just fit perfectly together. Like, that's just what I get. That's the impression I get with Jonadab. All right. So in all this, Absalom flees. Right? He's out of there. Which, in a way, is kind of noble. Like, Absalom, he's a terrible dude, but notice what he was willing to sacrifice for his sister. Right? I mean, he literally, like, he just leaves. Right? He flees. He goes on the run just because he was seeking vengeance for what this guy had done against his sister. In a way, there's some sort of nobility to that. Ultimately, we're going to see that Absalom ends up having treasonous conspiracies and like has his own ambitions and stuff. But something about that I think is kind of valiant, right? The fact that he was willing to do this just to protect his sister's honor, once again, doesn't make it all right. I don't think we should agree with what he did. He enacted vengeance and he enacted justice, and it was not his duty to do either. Vengeance belongs to the Lord, justice belongs to the government, and ultimately to God. He took it into his own hands. That is bad. But I think that there's something in there to admire, and maybe that's just me trying to find somebody to respect in all of this other than Tamar.
It's like wrongly directed admirability.
What's that?
Wrongly directed admirability.
Yeah, wrongly directed admirability, exactly. So Absalom flees, and notice whose footsteps he's kind of following in, right? And you're going to notice Absalom, in many ways, what were you going to say?
Kind of like David.
Kind of like David, yes. Yeah, in many ways, Absalom, it almost seems intentional. He's going to almost follow in his father's footsteps and try to replicate David's life, right? So that he can be the new David. He's going to flee, and he's going to be on the run, and eventually he's going to do what probably most people thought David was doing against Saul, right? And he's going, like, because most people probably, like, remember, what were the rumors whenever Saul was king? What did people think that David was trying to do? And what did Saul try to say David was trying to do?
Put himself on the throne.
Put himself on the throne, right? So Absalom's going to basically do, like, he is going to do to David what Saul thought David was doing to Saul, right? If that makes sense,
But not
right?
what David actually did.
Exactly. Yeah, so they're going to be like foils to one another, right? Absalom is what Saul feared, whereas David is what Absalom probably should have been, right? And if he wanted to actually be king. So Absalom flees, and the young man who kept the watch lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, many people were coming from the road behind him by the side of the mountain. So you have all these people, they've been fleeing from this bloodbath, which really I guess is mainly Amnon who died. Still probably bloodbath. And they've been fleeing. And Jonadab said to the king, behold, the king's sons have come. As your servant said, so it's come about. And it's like got some like stupid, goofy grin on his face. It's like, yeah, my firstborn son is still dead. And like, weren't you his friend? Like, remember, that's how he's introduced. He was Amnon's friend. This dude does not seem shaken up at all by this. Like, all basically words mean nothing in this chapter. He loved her. No, he didn't. They were friends. No, they weren't. This is the loosest sense of the terms. So Jonadab said to the king, "Behold, the king's sons have come. As your servant said, so it's come about." And as soon as he had finished speaking, behold, the king's sons came and lifted up their voice and wept. And the king also and all his servants wept very bitterly. Why are they weeping? Because Amnon's dead. Their son is dead. Their brother is dead. This is heartbreaking. And their other brother, their other son, the one who killed him. It's like Cain and Abel. Right? That's what's going on here. This is horrible. I mean, when you think of Cain and Abel, you're not thinking, oh, this is a healthy family dynamic. No, this is horrible. And it's like, what's going to happen next? The family is split apart. Amnon was the firstborn. Absalom, I mean, everybody loved Absalom. Everybody's going to love Absalom. Like, what's happening here? Like, the family's just ripped apart. Their sons are coming back. You imagine David, like, hugging them, being like, I thought you were dead. But Absalom fled and went to Talmai, the son of Ammihud, king of Geshur. So, kind of like how David, whenever he was on the run from Saul, went to the Philistines, Absalom also goes to Gentiles, right? So he also goes to some other foreign king and dwells with them. And David mourned his son day after day. Once again, not the best look for David. Is it good for him to mourn his son? Yes. Is it good for him to mourn his son day after day? Yeah. Why is this not a good look for David?
Because of his sin, his family's falling apart, and he knows that because of it, this is the consequence for his sin.
Yeah.
I mean, because there's no action following it?
Kind of, partially. So there's that. I wasn't even considering that. Mainly, it's because we didn't see any reaction like this after the thing with Tamar. Right? That's what I'm trying to highlight. He seems really torn up about Amnon, who did some horrific stuff, but he was just angry whenever Amnon did this thing against Tamar. Like, he seems a lot more grieved over Amnon than he was over Tamar. And Amnon, to be fair, he did have it coming to him, right? I mean, Jonadab is correct in that way. He's like, hey, Absalom, he might not have said it out loud, but he's been planning this ever since that happened. Yeah, Amnon did technically have it coming. You can't say that Amnon received something he didn't deserve. Did he receive it how he should have? No. But he did deserve what he got, right? He deserved death because of what he done. Doesn't mean it's all right. Doesn't mean it's how it should have happened, but he did deserve it. David's mourning that. Did Tamar deserve what she received? No. That's why I'm saying it's not the best look, because David seems a lot more torn up over this than the former. David mourned his son day after day, so Absalom fled and went to Jeshurun and was there 3 years. Do you see like the contrast? It's like David, Absalom, David, Absalom, Absalom's fleeing, David's mourning, Absalom's fleeing, David's mourning. It's just going back and forth like pinballing between the two of them. How long has Absalom gone? 3 years. So how many years has this single chapter spanned?
5 years.
5 years, right? Because you have Amnon and Tamar at the beginning, 2 years pass, and then Absalom enacts this thing, and he flees for another 3 years. So 5 years have already passed over this time period. And the spirit of the king longed to go out to Absalom because he was comforted about Amnon since he was dead. Okay, so then we have this nice little resolution kind of towards the end. What happens here?
Almost like, because Amnon's gone, I guess I better go see my other son since he's still around, kind of.
Yeah, what is something?
Repeat the question again.
Well, what is verse 39 expressing?
I think it'd be like, I guess David's maybe like come to the realization that like Amnon is dead, and so he can't really do anything about it, but Absalom is still alive, but he's not united with the rest of his family, so he's out there wandering around, and David can't really like necessarily do anything about it, but he can't do anything about Amnon being dead. It's almost like whenever his son died, he gets up and he starts praising the Lord because he's like, God has made his decision, and he couldn't do anything about it at that point.
He's like, I can't do anything to affect the past.
Yeah.
I can't change the past. All I can do is change the future. Right? And it seems like that's kind of the mentality he adopts here. Where he's like, okay, time passes, he mourns Amnon, he reflects on it, and there's probably a part of him that realizes that Absalom did something that he probably should have done. Probably not how Absalom did it. It probably should have been like, he probably should have been on trial and something should have gone down like that. Or he probably realized that Absalom did do something slightly admirable, right? Mm-hmm. Not that it was good. It was sinful and wrong, but it was rooted in a desire for justice, right? So over time, he sobers up, he thinks about it, and he does actually start to miss his son a little bit, Absalom. And originally he was probably very furious over the fact that you killed my son. But then he realizes, well, I mean, Amnon did it, like, he probably realizes where Absalom was coming from. And it wasn't like Absalom just wanted to murder. Absalom felt like he needed to, right? And so that's one good thing about David. He empathizes with people, right? He's very good at this. Like, he knows like how to relate to people. That's one reason why people love David so much. He's good at that. He understands people. And so it seems like after time, he eventually is like, man, he wants to fix the family relationship, right? He doesn't want Absalom to be out there. However, in the chapters to come, we're going to see that David's still kind of teetering there. It's not going to be as easy. It's not going to be like, hey, Absalom, come on back home. No, David's still going to be very wary. And it's going to be a long journey to get there. But the longing is at least there.
And he probably doesn't want to lose another son either.
Yeah, that's probably it as well. Right? He's like, okay, we can't change the past, but maybe I can reconcile this and we can try to put the family back together.
Yeah, he's already lost 2 sons, so.
Yeah. Don't want to lose a third.
It's a heck of a cliffhanger for the end of like an episode or something, or a season.
Yeah.
If it was a show.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that's the thing. Like, really, chapters 13, 14, 15, 16, they all go together. Like, it's just one really long narrative. And we're just going to be with, like, Absalom for a while. So, yeah, there's that. Sorry, we went a little bit long. But even then, you probably noticed we didn't go nearly as in-depth into each individual verse as we typically do. But that's okay. Kind of sad, though. But thanks for being patient there on the last few minutes. But it was a long chapter. But y'all have anything y'all want to add there? Real quick. We didn't talk any application today. We didn't talk like 0 application. What are some maybe just principles we can take out of this beyond like don't sleep with your sister?
Right. I got one.
Okay.
Throughout all this, ever since the story with David and Bathsheba is, we need to learn that our sin doesn't just affect us, but it affects everybody around us because David is reaping the consequences of his sin with Bathsheba, and this is what he has to live with.
Yeah. Because sometimes whenever we sin, we're like, oh, I can deal with the consequences, but realize it doesn't just affect you.
Yeah.
So if the consequences you might face aren't enough to stop you from sinning, think about the consequences others might face because of your sin. That's good. What else?
Learn self-control.
Yes.
That's probably the number one takeaway from all of this. Yeah, that is probably like the ding, 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 ding. Yeah, self-control. It's a fruit of the Spirit. We should all learn to have it. Think about how much would be avoided here. Self-control. David and Bathsheba, that would not have happened. David killing Uriah, that would not have happened. Amnon and Tamar, that would not have happened. Absalom killing Amnon, that would not have happened. Right? None of this would have happened if people just exercised self-control. If they reined their passions in, they reined their emotions in, maybe set them to the side for a moment and actually just approach things. And you know what they should have done? Inquired of the Lord. You notice how nobody's been doing that? Nobody's been asking God, like, hey, what should I do? Was God even mentioned in this chapter?
I was just going to ask that.
I don't think he would.
I thought Ruth was the only book in the Bible that he mentioned.
Well, I mean, like, he's mentioned in the book. I just don't know if he's mentioned in this chapter.
No.
Probably not a good sign. Probably not a good sign whenever you're in a book dealing with the man after God's own heart and God is not being mentioned. So, yeah. There are a lot of principles that we could take from this. I trust y'all to kind of pick up on them, but self-control is probably the numero uno one.
Yes.
That we all probably need to grow in, for sure.
Good.
But, yeah, because we don't want to be here. Basically, the only person who's admirable in this entire chapter is Tamar. And even then, we can't even say how admirable she was in general. We just know how admirable she was in a situation where she's literally just fighting for her life. In which case, she could just be admirable because she's trying to speak logic, right? So, but we can at least take some stuff away from there, right?
And kind of related to like the self-control thing, like ever since the David and Bathsheba thing, one thing we've been talking about is like not dealing with those desires and things like ahead of time, like not letting them stick around for years.
Yeah, that's once again the whole book, 1st and 2nd Samuel. It's about God looking to the heart, which means that yes, we can only look to the external appearance, but we need to be examining our hearts, and we need God to examine our hearts, and we shouldn't only be concerned about, ooh, why do I keep doing this sinful thing? We need to be asking, why do I keep wanting to do the sinful thing? There are plenty of sins that we have that we might never actually act upon. But that's not enough. We need to figure out why we're desiring those, and we need to address that issue, which is something that a lot of these people just aren't doing. So keep that in mind. It's way past time now. Can I get somebody to close us out in prayer, and then y'all can head home?
On prayer, I just wanted to announce that my sister today had a graduation.
Yes, she did.
She's a nurse, and she UTMB School of Nursing. She got a master's in leadership. Like, it's basically nurse, administration essentially.
Yeah.
Something
What's your sister's name again?
Lines. Karen.
Karen.
She's a Karen. She's
there,
top Karen.
Yeah, there you go.
She's carrying out.
Yeah, could somebody in their closing prayer just mention Karen and just thank God for getting her through the school and
Oh
stuff?
yeah, well, school's a big deal. And
Yeah.
there's nursing. There's a lot of them, and they're very much needed. So,
Absolutely.
you know.
Go for it, Maverick.
Dear Yahweh, Lord Jesus, I pray to you that you'll watch over Karen and just watch over her during her life as a nurse and when she's not a nurse, and just looking out for her. And I thank you for all of you, no matter what. It's in your name I pray. Amen.